Hey guys, it's Will Krisky from Potato Strong. As you probably heard by now, the WHO, the World Health Organization, has declared that processed meat is classified as carcinogenic to humans, and red meat is was classified as probably carcinogenic. And so this has created quite a storm on the internet. I just wanted to make a few points. One is that every 50-gram portion increases the risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. So a lot of times on the news they're saying, well, if there's a 5% risk of getting cancer, then this increases it to 6%. So they minimized it quite a bit, but people are eating a lot more than 50 grams. They're having it often multiple times a day, bacon, hot dogs, and pretty much exceeding this. But there's been a lot of just minimizing by all these doctors and stuff. And the other thing is, this has been known for quite a long time by various cancer institutes. This has been limited. And the funny thing is, there's actually a lot more than just red meat and processed meat. They always seem to focus on those. But there's a lot of other cancer-causing elements in animal products. So there's other factors that lead to cancer, which would be IGF-1, insulin growth-like factor. A lot of it's there for growing animals from babies, like calves, milk, quick growing. But when you're an adult, this can stimulate the growth of cancer cells. There's that new 5-GCC that you can look into. I'll put some links below. There's heme iron. Lots of other pathways that lead to cancer. Some of the fish has toxic chemicals like mercury, PCBs. And so I like to see this expand a lot beyond just processed meat and red meat. But there's a video. So CBC, which is in Canada, did a multiple segments on this, but it was really sad as far as what the doctor was saying. So let's just play that here.
Let's take a close look at Dr. Danielle Martin. She's a family physician and vice president at Women's College Hospital in Toronto. Dr. Martin is also a contributor to the National, and she joins me from Women's College Hospital. Dr. Martin, let me ask you straight up. Do we need to quit processed meat like hot dogs the way that we quit cigarettes? No, probably not. I don't think we have to rush right out to the barbecue.
So the first thing is, this is classified as a carcinogen like cigarettes and arsenic. I mean asbestos. And she's saying that we don't have to avoid it.
Throw the stuff off the grill into the garbage. But it is an important finding. The researchers looked at all of the worldwide evidence on processed meat and red meat, and they did find a significant association between how much processed meat people consume and their risk of colon cancer. Not as strong as the association between cigarettes and lung cancer, but an important finding nonetheless. How strong is it? Well, what the researchers found was that high consumption of processed meat probably increases a person's lifetime risk of developing colon cancer by around 18%. That doesn't mean that their lifetime risk is 18%, but an increase of 18%.
So as I mentioned earlier, the risk goes up by 18% for every 50 grams that you have per day of the product. So she's kind of starting to minimize it.
18% from the baseline. So, I think that what this finding really means is, in family medicine, we talk about sort of green light foods, yellow light foods, red light foods, like a stoplight. Red light foods are things you should never eat at all. And green lights, for example, stuff that you should eat plenty of. So the fruits, vegetables, that kind of thing. And so, to me, what this study does is it puts your sausages, your hot dogs, your processed meats squarely into that high yellow category. And so they've now become things.
So she's saying it's still a yellow category that you can have. And to me, this is something that should be avoided at all costs. Red light. And you'll see in a bit that she can't even come up with anything that's a red light food.
You should have really occasionally. certainly not daily.
Yeah.
And it's not just because of the carcinogenic stuff, it's also because of the amount of salt and fat that are in those processed
What would
foods.
be a red light food, in your opinion?
Arsenic.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So she said arsenic. She couldn't even come up with the food. This is something that's, like I said, in the range of asbestos in cigarettes, cancer causing, and she won't say that it's a red light food. It's unbelievable.
Red light foods, I'm joking. There are actually, in general, I would say that most things that you find in the processed food aisle would be in that yellow, high yellow category. They should be occasional foods, not all the time, foods. To me, red light foods are high and frequent consumption of anything in the yellow category.
Yeah, we were speaking with Richard Beliveau, the professor emeritus in biochemistry at the University of Quebec in Montreal. And he was saying, and I'll play a clip from him in a second, but he was saying that there is a direct relationship between processed meat and colorectal cancer. And in this country, colorectal cancer, he says, is the second most deadly cancer in the country after lung cancer.
Absolutely, he's right, and that is what this study found, a direct association. But just because there's a direct association, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who eats processed meat is going to get colon cancer. So, like everything else in life, and actually the researchers talk about this in their findings, we have to balance risks versus benefits. So, meat, not the processed kind in particular, but meat in general, animal products contain other things such as protein and iron that can be important for human health as well.
So we can get, it just doesn't make sense to take the risk. We can get protein and iron from plant foods. There's lots of protein in beans and nuts and things like that. And it's just not worth the risk. And for them to tell you to keep taking it to keep eating that food because there's some nutrients in there is just irresponsible as far as I'm concerned.
So where you've got an option to get your protein from other sources, I think we should probably be doing so. Does that mean that you can never ever, have a hot dog at a Canada barbecue? I don't think so.
Okay, here's what Professor Beliveau had to say about, because Suhanna had asked him about that earlier, and she said, look, this is how our brains grew over time by eating red meat and all of.
So that's a common misconception, is that we actually grew our brains and moved away from the equator, stuff like that, from eating meat. But some of the recent studies have shown that it's actually been the starch that enabled us to spend less time eating. It's a higher density food. That's a big misconception.
The nutrients that are in it. So what is it, why is it being reduced in this study? Red meat is being reduced as a probable carcinogenic that should be reduced to 1 pound a week. Have a listen to what he had to say.
The meat that we eat today is essentially industrially transformed meat, which is the animals, what they eat is corn and soy. They don't graze in the field anymore. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 has changed drastically from being high in omega-3 to low in omega-3, and from being low in omega-6 to high in omega-6.
Is there concern among the medical community about how our...
There's actually a lot of studies that in the past, when people ate grass-fed meat prior to the modern developments, that there were still lots of heart disease and issues. So the whole idea that grass-fed beef is healthier is just, basically the idea is that it's not really true anymore. It's not sustainable. There's 7 billion people. There's not enough land for everyone to eat grass-fed. But the fact is that our bodies are not really, our biology is not suited for animal products. It's more of a herbivore, starchivore. There's so many reasons with our intestines being long and our teeth and the acidity in our stomach that there's people, like we said, kings and queens and lots of studies on in the past when people ate meat that would have been grass-fed, that they still had many health issues, and they didn't live that long as well. So sometimes tribes like the Maasai are shown, and they actually have been shown to have heart disease and only live to their 40s and 50s. And so a lot of these longer, these diseases like cancer that take a long time to develop may not have shown themselves.
Meat is processed in this country?
Yeah, so I think we need to be careful about separating the findings about processed meat,
Yeah.
which were pretty clear
Right.
in this report, from red meat more generally. So processed meat is stuff that's been smoked and cured and had, chemicals added to it and this sort of thing. Red meat would be your classic sort of piece of steak or lamb or whatever.
Yeah.
And actually with the researchers, well, hamburger that hasn't had other stuff added to it, right? That's just made for meat without anything else in there or any preservatives or anything else. So, those kinds of foods with just red meat, the researchers found a probable association with colon cancer, but it is a little bit more complex because it has to do with whether you cook it at high heat or low heat. I think as a general rule, what we can probably say from the worldwide literature that these scientists took a look at is unmitigated consumption of meat, so just unlimited consumption of red meat is not a good idea. And in fact, I guess this is what I'm trying to get at. Unlimited consumption of most things is probably not a good idea. And I think what Canadians should take from this study is, of course,
I don't think that's really true. I think we can eat a lot of things, as much as you want, spinach and vegetables, fruit and vegetables, and things like that. So she's just trying to minimize once again.
can get access to grass-fed meat like the professor was talking about, that's great. But in general, we should be looking at our red meats as things to be eaten in moderation and increasing the variety in our protein sources.
What is
So,
moderation?
the Canada Food Guide talks about eating moderation. Moderation would be, a few times a week as opposed to 3 times a day.
Right, and Dr. Gallivo and others are saying 1 pound of red meat a week. Would that be in line?
Right, so, sure, so, a pound, which is about, approximately 500 grams, these researchers talked about sort of 50 grams a day, so I think that's sort of in line, yeah. I mean, again, if you're eating, not that I know Canadians are, but if you're eating processed meat like bacon or sausage with your breakfast, and then you're also having meat in your lunch, and you're having some kind of meat in your dinner, that's too much. So we should be looking at non-animal sources of protein. We should also be looking at fish and seafood and other sources of, lentils and all the other good sources of protein that exist, and eating a varied diet.
Okay. All right. Just one more question. We see on the shelves now, and maybe as a physician you aren't able to answer this, but we see on the shelves now natural processed foods. Is there a difference? Did the study distinguish between these and what we have eaten, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago?
This study did not distinguish between the so-called natural processes and, unnatural processes, whatever those are. I would say that we should assume, until somebody produces evidence to the contrary, that processed meat is processed meat. And I would personally, I plan to stay away from it and have it as a really occasional thing in a circumstance where that's what I choose to do, and we're always balancing risks versus benefits.
So you answered the last question before I asked you. What are you going to do as a result of the study? Dr. Daniel
That's my
Martin.
plan. I think we should all be switching it up. Thank you.
To more plants. Okay, Dr. Danielle
She snuck into more plants there. That's pretty
Martin,
funny.
family physician and vice.
Circumstance where
So that's pretty
what I
funny.
choose to do,
Just play that
and we're
again for
always
you guys.
balancing risks versus benefits.
So you answered the last question before I asked you. What are you going to do as a result of the study? Dr. Danielle
That's my
Martin.
plan. I think we should all be switching it up. Thank you.
To more plants. Okay, Dr. Danielle Martin.
To more plants. So that's funny how she threw that in there. So it's really sad, all the stuff that's on the news, the way they everyone's talking about missing their bacon and that they can still have it, and everyone just wants to be reassured. So anyways, just thought I'd share that with you guys. And just overall, it's a good thing that more and more of this stuff is getting out, but there's a long way to go. So we've got to keep working at this. Talk to you guys later.